Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with Changemakers. I'm Robin.
And I'm Yoshi. On the Coffee with Changemakers podcast, we explore the stories of changemakers taking on some of today's biggest social and environmental challenges.
Every episode, we host an intimate conversation on social impact and leadership, where we listen, learn, and connect over a cup of coffee with inspiring guests from all over the world.
So before we jump into today's episode, we have a quick ask. If you enjoy our conversations, it would mean the world to us if you subscribe, rate, and perhaps even tell a friend about the show. Your support helps us bring even more inspiring guests onto future episodes.
So, here's today's coffee chat. Enjoy. So today we'll be speaking with Zubair Junjunia, the founder of ZNotes, a social impact startup tackling educational inequality around the world. So I first met Zubair in the UK a few years ago, and what I really loved about his story is that he started ZNotes while he was still in school in his teens, with a simple idea to level the educational playing field, and has spent the past decade building his organization and building a collaborative movement by students for students, to the point where it's now impacting millions of young people across the globe. Wow. Zubair is also a Generation17 Young Leader appointed by the UNDP and is a recipient of the prestigious Diana Legacy Award, and is often sharing his insights and learnings at different events and gatherings around the world. So I'm super excited to dive straight into it and welcome our guest. So hey Zubair, how are you doing?
Hi Robin, good to see you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and having me here today.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for making time. We're super excited to chat with you and hear your story. So maybe we can get straight into it and ask, how did your journey with ZNotes begin?
Of course. And funnily enough, today I'm recording the episode from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I'm usually based in London, but I'm visiting family here for a few weeks. And this is also the city where ZNotes all started, in fact, in my teenage bedroom. You see, when I had this kind of very beautiful upbringing of a third culture kid, Pakistani parents, living in Saudi Arabia and pursuing a British education system. And I could see around me that this was this incredible privilege to have this diversity of thought and experiences. But at the same time, as I sat those examinations which determined our lives, where we study, where we end up at university, where we go to jobs, it became clear to me that not every young person was getting the same support, resources, or even teaching, and it just didn't sit right. So it just struck me that I had to do something about it. And during that period of time, as I was preparing for my own exams, I created these very good quality revision notes, and ZNotes all started with just me putting some sets of notes onto a website and creating a WordPress blog and putting it into the internet. And the journey has gone ever since.
Amazing. And so back then you were 16 years old, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, just out of my GCSE exams. And I was already, tinkering with websites on the internet. So it was lots of fun building stuff. So in many ways, it was both a social challenge that I was looking to address, but also cultivated and used some of the skills that I'd been developing independently, like graphic designing and web development. These were things I enjoyed doing. And in many ways, it's provided me a vehicle to do both things that I was passionate about and things that I really believed there was a social challenge to address.
Amazing. And looking back at your 16-year-old self, did you ever imagine that it could possibly get this large and this impactful on a global scale?
No, and I don't think many people who were there right at the beginning ever thought so either. I describe myself as an accidental entrepreneur. I went out to solve a problem, and that problem resonated with so many that it has turned into what it is today. So after my school, I was kind of still driven in my interests in academics, and I went off to do pursue a degree in mathematics. And it was only into my second year or so when I thought, wow, ZNotes is growing at such a rapid rate. And it's the beauty of scale was starting to come up. And that was where I started to kind of divert my interest and my energies towards this initiative to see where we can take this further. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Amazing. So maybe we can dive into ZNotes and what it is. I'll hand over to Yoshi.
Yeah, sure. All right. So I'm so excited for this part too. So Yeah, I mean, yesterday I was doing a bunch of research on ZNotes. I even joined the Discord channel. And it was just so fun to see all the students like exchange memes and have like so much fun in the platform. But for our listeners, I was wondering if you could just, share a little bit more about, what is the organization? What does it do? What's its impact, right? So if you can just give us a really, really brief summary, that would be great.
Absolutely. So again, seeing those experiences of the different realities when it came to exam preparations, set out to address those inequalities. How can we make sure that every young person entering a standardized exam, which determine their life and their choices, can be given the equal or equitable resource and support? And the solution was quite unique. Instead of trying to do a whole bunch of things that required systemic changes, we thought, let's break the system from the inside. Let's empower young people to not just be these kind of passive consumers, but then create them and turn them into agents of change. So with those first sets of notes that I put online, we've had now hundreds of students all volunteer their time to co-create high quality learning resources. And these students are not just, A-star students, but sometimes one of the world's best exam writers in the world. They're the
Wow.
ones who get the world's top results. They dedicate their time, they engage with us, share their exam credentials, work with us to create these learning resources, which are published onto our learning platform that has now been accessed by over 5 million students in 190 countries. And the second key component, which you kind of touched on, Yoshi, is we realize that the resources are key, but actually the community around it is where you develop the deeper academic knowledge, but also the social capital you need for the next steps of your journey. And so we then connected our learning platform and resources with a dedicated Discord server where we have almost 40,000 members today. And this is a space
Wow.
where young people are learning together. So they're from all over the world, and that doesn't really matter to them because they're all pursuing that same beast at the end of the day. They're fighting that same enemy, which is these standardized exams, and they learn from each other. They share their knowledge. They share their insights. They democratize social capital because they're anonymized, because they're engaging with each other. They don't really share, oh, I'm going to a more privileged school than you are, but actually, hey, this is something I'm learning. But maybe you can take that away into your own preparation. And in doing so, they're both preparing for their exam, but also for life. So at the heart of it, Xenos is tackling these secondary school examinations that students between the ages of 14 to 18 take every year all over the world, and make sure that it becomes a level playing field. And the solution is all about empowering young people to be the change makers to themselves.
Wow, that is so cool. I mean, I wish I had ZNotes when I was a teenager, right? Like Robin and I, I think Robin and I, both sort of struggled at school. Like I was a average B, sometimes, oftentimes C, very rarely A type of student. So man, if I had ZNotes, I think my life would have been a little bit different. So man, I wish you were born 10, 15 years a little earlier. But
Maybe, but I might not have had the internet at this stage that I was.
that's right. That's true. That's true.
Very
Maybe it was
true.
all right.
That's true. Well, throughout, I mean, your journey, I'm sure, you and your team faced a multitude of, challenges along the way. So I was wondering, if you could maybe share some of these challenges with us today. And feel free to share like a story with us, because all three of us, we are one young world people. So we always love a good story.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you the story that happened right here on this desk. I was So Xenos has been around for just about 12 months now, and I was doing my A-level examinations. So I was just getting into the most important exams, which will determine whether I enter the university of my choice or not. And unfortunately, certain issues had happened on the website which had caused it to crash.
Oh
And
no.
further inspection found out that it was not just an accident, but actually an intentional attack by someone to bring the website down.
Wow.
And it was
Wow.
just crazy. I was like, why had this happened? Who was doing it? Who was behind it? And because it was causing an issue on kind of other servers as well, the host said, "I'm sorry, but we cannot continue hosting your website. It may jeopardize and it was causing a security breach." I'm like, okay.
Oh
And
no.
here I
Wow.
am, not too different, like literally just around this time, April of 2015, I think. And with my exams upcoming in a couple of weeks, this website, which was supposed to serve millions, well, at the time, tens of thousands of students, suddenly coming crashing down and getting a deluge of emails saying, "Hey, Zubair, what is happening to your website?"
Wow.
And it was not an easy time for sure. I was trying to scramble and write emails to everyone responding to me and sharing the PDFs one at a time, and then looking at where I can alternatively rehost my website. And
Wow.
I think balancing that act was a tough time, but worthwhile at the end, because the people who needed the resources got it, and in a couple of days or a couple of hours time, I was able to kind of find the right solution
Oh,
to get it live
good.
again. So
Wow.
things resolved, but it was a challenging time, and I think this kind of represents um, one consistent part of a journey, especially for a founder who starts at quite a young age. Um, and well, I don't even think it has to be a young age, to be honest, but a founder who has kind of like had my studies, I had my school, I had my university, and I built this throughout those years. And every time there comes a point where you need to prioritize, and we need to find the space and time to do things which are difficult.
Mm.
You're oftentimes carving out your free time to do things that you
Mm.
can that can create an impact. And at this stage, for example, this example is where I was trying to do my own exam preparation. I was trying to revise for my own exams, and I was like, okay,
Right.
I need to balance both things.
Wow.
As a social entrepreneur, bootstrapping, and as a kind of again, developing it and building it from a younger age, or even while doing another thing, um, I think this remained a big challenge for me throughout my school and university life. Was how do you balance responsibilities of your studies? How do you balance responsibilities of being uh, a teenager and a young person with their own kind of
Mm.
social habits and kind of society and friends around you? And then how do you balance the work that you do as well? And finding that balance is maybe one of the hardest things that you have to do as a founder, but it also is one that creates resilience and creates the tenacity for you to continue to build an organization uh, beyond those kind of formative years, if I were to describe it in that way, when the organization is just about to start or just kind of developing its legs, but it needs that extra support, the care, the cultivation to really take it to the next level. So
Mm.
challenging time, and I think challenges that I can continue the journey, and like the current challenges are very different to the challenges that we had right at the beginning, but it's an evolution of these things as well.
Mm.
And Zubair, you mentioned balance. Now, I think balance is a really key word for a lot of social entrepreneurs, as you say. I've a lot of social entrepreneurs around me, and activists and people who are very mission driven tend to get extremely focused on their work and can often forget about their self care, their mental health, physical
Yep.
health, and so on. But having been doing this for several years now, have you gotten any closer to achieving that balance? And if so, what are some tips or
Yeah.
reflections on how to achieve balance?
Uh, so the funny thing is that you every time you think you've achieved that level of you know neutral space or balance, it gets disturbed, and
Mm.
the stakes just get harder and harder. So every
Mm.
year you are enhancing as an individual, as a founder, you're growing what you do, but at the same time the expectation, the responsibility, the work that you need to achieve just continues to increase, so the bar continues to go higher and higher. There is one thing that plays a big role in my personal kind of well-being, and how I prioritize that across this kind of journey of building Xenos through school, through uni, through my first few years of work, and then working on this full time now. And it's a principle that my mentor taught me, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's a very simple one, but he says that to stay healthy, strong, resilient, and happy, there are three things that you need to prioritize. He says you need to eat well, you need to sleep well, and you need to move well.
Hmm.
So there are three very simple things, very simple words, and they've stuck with me because and really become part of the way I've developed my lifestyle.
Hmm.
So in terms of, I'll start with the same order. So eating well is very important to me. I will do a lot of things, but I will always carve out time to cook a good meal. And so
Mm.
there's no devices around me when I'm eating. There's just focus on the
Nice.
food, and oftentimes with community as well. You want to eat with someone. You want to have
Mm.
that space to kind of really celebrate what you're doing and what you're having. Always cooking with fresh ingredients and so forth. So eating well has been a staple, and this is part of my mom's teaching as well. Always teaching me to be healthy and happy. So
Mm.
that's kind of come through. Sleeping well. something we probably didn't do very well at school. But suddenly, as soon as I got to uni and beyond, I started to think that actually I was so much more effective if I slept better, and gave myself enough time. So I often give myself enough, in between 8 to 9 hours every evening, not all to sleep, but also to take the time away from any work that I'm doing and kind of wind down. Oftentimes, so my habit is to read a book. So I have a really good book to cozy up with, phones away, and then you're just trying to take your time off and take the rest. Um, this is another big challenge with entrepreneurs, where you're kind of so driven that your brain never stops, and rest is such a huge part of reigniting that creativity, re-energizing you, and actually giving you the power to do more. And the third one, which is move well, and that is uh, another habit that I picked up when I was at school. I was part of a running team at the end of my schooling years, and that running coach told me that he had a ritual of running every single day, a minimum distance, and that he had been doing that for a long, long time, for a few months or maybe a year or so. I thought, wow, this was me at the time, not able to run a kilometer without huffing and puffing. How can he be achieving that as a human being as well? And I can't even do a kilometer. So um, around the age of 17, I think, so it's not too long since ZNotes, I started giving myself this rule that actually I want to be able to run every day. And
Wow.
I had a couple of false starts, but about 9 years ago, and I decided that I was going to run at least a minimum distance of 5 kilometers every single day, and the rule was that would have to be between midnight and 11:59 of every day that I'm in the time zone that I'm in. And that has been a journey in itself as well. I think I've ran over 3,000 kilometers to date, and there's not been a single day missed. Rain,
Wow.
snow, sleet, days where
Wow.
I've had
Wow.
overnight flights where I've had to run at midnight to be able to capture the next day's run.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
Runs
Wow.
where I've had injured knees because of skating injuries, and so I would be running
Mm.
literally on one foot. It's just been a crazy one. Runs after a marathon; those are tough. You come out of a marathon, and the next day you have bandages on your knees, and you're like hardly able to walk, but then you just need to get the clock that run in. It's a little bit fanatic, and it's not for everyone for sure, but it is something that just represents that it's a consistent habit, and it's something that's such a big priority for me to make sure that I'm getting out there, uh, really exercising and engaging my whole body in something that is helping me really disconnect from work as well. So running is then can translate into long distance cycling and open water swimming, and hopefully doing a triathlon at some point. A whole bunch of other sports like rock climbing and hiking, and so I do a lot of things which are very holistic, very whole body type of movements. Oftentimes solo sports, which is quite interesting. Maybe because they allow me to jump into it without expecting anything from anyone. So I don't have any excuses, right? I don't have a team of 11 aside, so I can't play football. But actually, I can go for a run. So it's always there. There you can always put your shoes on, and it's you're never required a stadium or an arena or a specific field. So that's been my journey of kind of, I think self care would be one way of describing it. Balance would be one way of describing it. And I would, there's so many things that I've done to develop as an individual over the last 10 years of Xenos. But I think these three principles have really played a big role. They seem outside, you know, work, but actually they play such a big role in who you are and how you operate in your working life and in your personal life as well, I think.
Wow. Thanks for that reminder, Zubair. Like, I mean, I can totally relate to that. And because, last year, especially towards the end of 2023, I wasn't in a good place. And Robin knows this because he's one of my closest buddies. But I wasn't doing any of the three. I wasn't eating well, I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't moving well. And I'm actually part of the reason why I'm back in, I'm in Thailand, is because I just needed to reset. And I started with your advice number 3, moving well. So I signed up for Muay Thai lessons,
Mm.
and because I did that, it made me hungry after every training session. So I then started to eat well, And then when you're full, it makes you sleepy. So it helped me to sleep well. So like, starting your journey in one of the three can help you actually fix the other two as well. So I
Yeah.
think you're definitely onto something there. I just wanted to, say kudos.
Yeah.
I love that. Same. I'm going to give pitch in with my little story, but I at one point essentially burnt out from getting too mission focused and not looking after myself. And I remember at one point I was sleeping consistently about 4 or 5 hours, and I'd wake up and I would somehow get through the day, but I had this very kind of cloudy perspective. I couldn't really think clearly, and it just got really to the point where I had to fundamentally fix something. And then I read a book called Why We Sleep. And I highly recommend this to anyone who's interested in sleeping more and understanding more about sleep. But that completely changed my perspective. And since then, things have taken a 180-degree shift. So I love this eat well, sleep well, move well philosophy.
Yeah. All right. Well, kind of, well, that was an awesome discussion on, balance. But just kind of moving back to ZNotes here. So I'm sure, you've had a lot of rewarding moments as well, right? You've addressed some of the challenges that you faced, but I'm sure there were some rewarding moments. And I was wondering if you could also share some key accomplishments or highlights in your journey.
Absolutely. Before I do, I want to take one step back before I tell you.
Of course.
Because Robin's recommended such a good book, I want to also recommend a book, which I only recently read, but it describes personal habits and trainings and these things so well. It's a Murakami book, and it's a book called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. And it's a really, really good one. It's a short one, semi-autobiographical, really. It's such his writing style is so beautiful anyway, but this is such a conversational book that it's not even about running. It's more about you and your growth and your development and his journey as an author. But it just kind of capture his, and he's one of the kind of street runner type people as well. So I really recommend that book.
Amazing. That's going straight into my reading list. Thanks, Zubair.
Go for it. Sorry, Yushi, I had to go back, and I'll come back to your question. So,
No, not at all. No problem.
Rewarding moments. I think the transformation from being my notes to actually other people contributing as well was it was very early on, but it was a really pivotal moment. That was back in I think 2019 or so, where we had one of the individuals and students emailing me saying, "Hey, I want to help out and I want to contribute notes as well." That went from like, wow, there are people who have just seen a website and are deciding to dedicate their time to contribute to the platform. That's incredible. And this is just going to continue to grow every single year. This year we had a whole bunch of impact statistics to talk about in our launch of our impact report. We have the 5 million visitors. We have almost 400,000 registered users. We've reached tens of thousands of educators, and the kind of growth in the mindset development as well. But the one thing that really struck me was that we had 800 applications from young people all over the world who wanted to dedicate their time towards contributions, ambassadorships, internships.
Wow.
These are 800 teenagers who have raised their hands and seen an initiative and said, "I want to be behind it." They're 800 people who've sat down and written out an application and shared their journey and why they want to do what they do. That's incredible. And especially for the kind of the narrative we have on Gen Z right now, this is such a big example and kind of representation of what actually exists in the motivation of these young people, how likely they are to give back when given the opportunity, how much agency they crave and when given what they can do. So I think of the many kind of like moments of kind of like gratification, that was one that like really struck me, is that we had more applications in a single year than we had in all past years combined. So that growth is something which was really, really, really validating. Over the years, there have been like milestones where, for example, we reached our first million, then reached our first learning platform. When we started to grow our team, and we went from 10 or 5 or 7 interns to now having over 50 or so at any given moment. Wow. And each of these moments have been incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. And I think then the kind of personal recognitions have been incredibly honoring, but also platforming as well. So starting off with Robin, the One Young World journey, That was back in 2019 for me as well, where I was invited to the London Summit. And, this was me. I'd never been part of a changemaker community before. And suddenly here I was able to share my journey with fellow changemakers and meet other and create this sort of community. And I think the forums that I've been kind of privileged to speak at ever since, whether that's the ECOSOC Youth Forum, the key UN events, moments in kind of the summits in the Middle East, like the Y Summit, the Miss Global Forum, each of them are, I don't know if this reward is the right word, but I think just a recognition of the impact that this youth-led organization has done, as well as the opportunity to really grow what we've done. These moments provided catalysts for new change makers to join the initiative, for new people to discover what we do. And I can just say, like communities like One Young World have been so valuable. The friends that I've formed are still some of my closest friends and people I look out to and reach out to and learn from, and they take from me. So it's kind of this kind of beautiful, symbiotic relationship that you form. So it's been a kind of a winding journey. I wouldn't say that. I think there are like these key milestones, and sometimes it's easy to forget them because you're just in the rush of doing more. But these have been really valuable to me over the past few years.
Oh, that's so cool, man. And like, in preparation for today's podcast, Robin and I were listening to some of your past recordings, and the more and more I find out about you and ZNotes, I realize that it's really not a me endeavor, but it's a we endeavor, And in one of your past episodes, you even said yourself that the beauty was not that I started something, but they carried it. And I think you were referring to some of your volunteers here. And I think what makes your organization even more interesting is that, some of your interns went on to become like change makers themselves, right?
Yeah.
So there is that culture where leadership is being nurtured. And so I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit more about that. Like how do you guys do that? How does that happen?
Yeah, and very much a byproduct of a decade worth of cultivation of a culture around the mission. But you're absolutely right. I think the most gratifying thing isn't just being the founder, but actually to see that there's so many people who've bought into this mission. And those are both the volunteers, young people who are part of the day-to-day activities. It's the advisors and mentors who have joined this initiative. It's the organizations that have taken a chance on us, who've supported us. It's the platforms that have elevated us. All of these people have come together to really create the impact that it is today. And I think that is, what are you most proud of? That's what I'm most proud of. It's the
Wow.
pride in knowing that this is not just a solo thing, and it's been really recognized and owned and kind of carried by so many around the world. And one of the kind of the points he talked about. So within ZNotes, we put on the tin, hey, this is a platform which helps you prepare for examinations, and that's kind of intentional. We've kind of made it a very simple kind of entry point. You need to do exams to get ready. Let's get you started. Let's get you sorted out.
Right.
But then you suddenly start using the platform. You're like, oh wow, I'm reading these notes, and it's by a kid called, Zan, who created the IGCSE biology notes, for example. And wait, why did Zan do this? And let me click on his profile. Let me go to the team page, and I see this unending list of young people's faces over and over again, showing me, oh, they're from here. I contributed this. I love doing this. These are individuals like me, like students like me, who are spending their time to do this. And then you discover that actually the whole organization is run by this kind of beautiful young people from all over the world, contributing their time. So you give them a volunteering here or contributing here, and you discover more and more. And that's when ZNotes becomes this kind of like, it tells you the story that actually this is not a solo, it's not a kind of a simple tech platform. It's a real community. So when we talk about impact as well, and I wanted to touch upon this before talking about the kind of the specific one that you talked about, the community element, is that it's the improvement in academic confidence and self-efficacy, which is key to improving the exam results. And we see things like over 90% of our users are more confident going into exams. I think that last year we had something like 70+% of our users had an improvement in their exam results itself, 1 or 2 point grade differences. So we are doing that. We're doing the thing that we talk about right at the beginning, is that getting you through those examinations. But then the other outcomes that we're really key on focusing on and improving are related to how can we make sure that we're creating global citizens? How can we make sure that young people are learning and meeting others from all over the world? And then the statistic that we get is that in our community of 37,000, 100% of our users are meeting people from different races, backgrounds, genders, and really learning and developing with each other.
Wow.
The other thing that was key for us is how to make sure that we create a mindset for social development, how to make sure that young people are aware of the SDGs, the challenges that are aware of them, but actually are realizing that they can be agents of change as well. Some of the most beautiful testimonials that we have in case studies, and I'd love anyone listening to check out our impact report at znotes.org/impact, are stories where young people say that, hey, I was 16 or I was 17 and my notes or my resources or my videos were being accessed by tens of thousands of students all over the world. That sense of empowerment is just transformational, and that means that they are more likely, and we have statistics and data to back it up, like from dozens and dozens of our past interns and ambassadors and contributors saying that they're more likely to join. I think 60-70% of them are more likely to choose a job which is serving marginalized communities. And 1 in 5 of our interns are more likely to be part of another NGO or initiative. In fact, you kind of touched upon this one, which is like we have had interns who have come into our organization and actually left starting their own initiative. They've come into our organization and then left with new internships and new opportunities and other impact-like initiatives. So it is very much the educational piece is key, the kind of the challenge that we're focused on in SDG 4, but it's also about the things that we can kind of empower young people to leave the entity, whether it's by just being a user and realizing that actually I learned from and prepared for and actually improved my results thanks to a youth-led organization. I want to be part of a movement in the future, or someone who's really dedicated their time and spent hours in the community, in the platform, in the development of it, and realize that actually I want to make sure that my life is aligned towards social impact objectives as well. That doesn't need to be an NGO. It can be, but also it can be working in different communities. It can be starting your own initiative on your side. It can be joining a job or working for a company that has that impact standard that we're looking for. So I think that's absolutely right. It's not just a me journey, it's a we journey, and it's really been. I think the impact is very much because of that as well. The scale is achieved not because it's a one-man band, but because it's a whole movement that's leading and taking this charge.
I love that. I want to touch upon community management, because you have all of these thousands and thousands and millions of people taking part in some way on your platform. But how do you, A, incentivize people, and B, how do you manage that growing community? I'd be really curious. As someone who also runs a crowdsourced platform, this is always something that I'm thinking about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned right a couple of minutes ago, I said, cultivating the culture and the community. What I really mean is actually you have to set the standard, you have to seed, and you have to represent and be the role model of what you wish to see in your community. In the beginning, now I can talk about these, incredible numbers that we've been able to achieve. But before, it was not like that. It was like a couple hundred people, a couple dozen interns, and then, trying to create that motivation, that spark. So for a long time, the community was very much modeled by the behaviors of the early adopters. So we really needed to communicate, share, and really turn them into our champions. There's a very beautiful, I can share the link, maybe if you want to include in the podcast notes, an example or kind of a theoretical model around community called the orbital model. What it says is that the community is built across various orbit levels. So think of a solar planet, solar system. Think of the sun in the middle, and think about all the planets orbiting it at different levels. And think about how the sun affects it in different ways. So poor Pluto out in the depths is not getting a lot of sunshine or any warmth. But when you think about Mercury, it's burning up. And think about sun as an impact, and think about the planets as different stakeholders or community members, and think about what the sun can do depending on the proximity towards it. So for us, we realize that actually ZNotes can make a big impact and a different impact to the ones that are closest to it, and not to agonize to make that happen for everyone, because you can't. I cannot scale the efforts of our interns into a lot more. With the internet application, we only had to take about 20-30% of them. A lot of them were not accepted and not taken on board, A, for capacity, or B, for alignment. And that kind of rigorous kind of selection process is also key to creating a community which actually thrives. So Number one is realizing that you can only do so much with so many members, and realizing that there's some community members that, I mean, we love our ZNotes users, but some of them will not engage with us in this highly engaged way, which is okay. We try as much as we can, we communicate, we share. We don't need to kind of convert everyone into an intern and an ambassador. That's okay as well. But we realize where they sit across the spectrum, and depending on that spectrum, we know where we can kind of support them and they can support us. So for our community members, those early adopters, those champions became the ones who represented the way the community operated. About 7 years into the journey of Xenos, we first wrote our theory of change model. We figured out how do we actually even talk about how we make impact and articulate it after doing it for 7 years. And it was kind of a retrospective activity. We also wrote a culture guide, which is not something you tend to do at this stage, but we described it as the A to Z Notes guide, and we talked about how we operated and why we did what we did. And we developed some beautiful onboarding materials. Again, something you don't usually do at this stage, but actually we were doing that before we even needed it. And actually that made such a big difference, because now what happens is that we have an intern joining almost every other day, an intern, a contributor, an ambassador in the kind of the core team. And I don't need to do anything because the team itself has done it so many times. The past intern who's been part of that community for a while is going to be the one who welcomes them. They'll be onboarding them. They'll be sharing the technical things, but also the softer things, like how do we operate? Why do we do what we do? How does a team communicate with each other? What are the things that are... So I think community management is a really difficult one. There is no silver bullet. It is a lot of time and effort into cultivating it, really giving so much value to the community members that really believe in it. Because once you do that, that investment actually returns and pays off in dividends, because it goes off and it shares it in the way that they welcome the next set of community members, how they onboard them, how they kind of continue that fabric that you started to develop. So I think time, identification of who is key and who actually makes a difference in that community. And then the third one is letting go, because a community isn't something that you can just dictate as to what it will look like and should look like. You need to set out principles and need to create, like, for example, we have a very, very strict policy on inclusivity in our community, making sure that the space is safe and welcoming and okay for everyone who wants to join in. So any deviations to that have to be taken in action on. We need to ban members. We need to kind of take actions on that. But at the same time, having those principles placed, the way the community then evolves and the way it changes even over time has to be natural. If you try to dictate and kind of create a shape and square that you want it to sit in all the time, it doesn't, because it's not supposed to be, because a community is an organic, metamorphizing, changing, ever growing and ever evolving kind of organism, and you need to let it grow and let it change and let it evolve, as long as it sits within those kind of key principles that you've set out. So the three things I would say: one, time, invest in those key members that you find useful. And number three is not to kind of agonize over every small detail. Some things will go perfectly, some things will change. I need to let the community be itself.
I love that. And you just dropped a whole bunch of knowledge bombs on us there, and honestly, the reason I was smiling like a madman is because so much of my time is invested in how to manage growing community. And you just mentioned the orbital model there, which I absolutely love. So for anyone who's interested in organizational management and change, the orbital model is super interesting, and how to grow a community organically as opposed to top down. So you just shared a whole bunch of things that really stuck with me. So thanks, Zubair.
Cool. Well, I mean, I guess I asked a bunch of questions already on your projects and on the impact. So I'm happy to move on to insights and reflections if that's cool with you, Robin.
Yeah, let's do it. So looking back at your journey, you must have grown in so many ways, building this organization, building this co-created movement. And you've already shared some things like balance, well-being, community management, and so on. But if you had to share some other ways in which you've grown, or some other key learnings, what would they be?
Be married to a problem, not your solution. As entrepreneurs, we love the thing that we built, and it's true. It's your baby. You want to, you have the greatest affection for it, and you want it to be what it is. But very early on, I had to realize that actually the solution that I was developing was to solve a problem. It wasn't the solution I should be aligned to. So in everything that I do now is that how does it address the social problem or the problem that we're looking to solve of the user, of the customer, of the audience, and working backwards from there. It's we all have the way we wanted to describe and build a solution, but I think being aligned to the problem is so much more important. Number two is we've talked about how to develop community, but actually community. So just building in a community, whether that is at the scale of what we do, where every user is part of or invited to be part of that community, or it's a small kind of inclusive or kind of exclusive one. Um, it could be a community of peers or friends or whatever it is. Having others around you that can support you, especially if you're on a solo journey, has been so important. I would also describe my community as all the advisors and mentors that take care of me and have helped me grow. The way I think, the way I operate, the kind of the kind of the details and nuances in ZNotes' model have evolved with the mentors who have been part of that journey. So that's part of the community as well. I think those are the two things that I really feel like are really important, and it's easy to overlook, especially when you're so narrowly focused, but have been really key for my personal development and both in Xenos and outside of it as well. Because of course you grow as an individual. What I was at 16 is not what I am today. What Xenos was at 16 is not what it is today, and I think those are important to realize. You need to keep growing, and you need to find the ways to grow as well. And these were the ones that have been really important for me.
I'd love to explore one thing you mentioned about mentors and mentorship. And I think this is an area that's really important for social entrepreneurs and change makers. And it's one thing I hear a lot, that people would like to have more mentors, both peer mentoring and people who are perhaps more experienced as well. But what would you advise for people who are looking for mentors? And do you have any tips in terms of how to develop strong and meaningful mentoring relationships?
Vulnerability. You need to be truly open and transparent. I think a mentorship relationship only becomes real when you are actually real with the mentor. And I was lucky enough to have mentors from a very young age, both in my kind of like schooling years and into my professional years. And I don't think I've ever kind of gone searching. I've almost always met people who have just felt like a shared sense of value and purpose, and been open with them. And the more I shared with them, the more I felt. And if they had the capacity and had the kind of the bandwidth for it, but also the kind of the receptiveness to it. And you can tell, we're humans. We're very good at telling when someone is listening to us and when someone really wants to give back to us. So the vulnerability test that I do is often being a little bit more open than the person in front of me, and either that kind of openness is taken in a kind of gracious way and kind of safeguarded and cultivated and nurtured or even reflected back, or that openness is taken in a exploitative way. And it's a good test, because when it's exploitative, you just move that person slightly further away from your circles, because it's okay. Not everyone is meant to form that depth of relationship. That's okay as well. But it does kind of very quickly give you that binary test of where does this relationship stand? I don't think we have a lot of time to form superficial relationships. So very quickly, I want to make sure that where am I going here? Am I creating a meeting at a networking dinner and, I want you something from you and you want something from me, and let's do this as quickly as possible? Or is it actually something that I don't know what I want from you and you don't know what you want from me, but I know that I want you to be part of this journey and I want to be part of your journey. Let's see where it goes. Which brings me to the second point. Mentors are, for me, they're sometimes the same age or sometimes significantly older, but in all cases, it's a symbiotic relationship. Almost every conversation I end is, how can I be helpful? Because yes, they may be the incredibly successful people, affluent, success in every possible way, and yet being you have to realize that the relationship is not just of taking, it's also of giving. And in being open and careful and sharing your journey, you're also giving them an access to a very unique story. You're asking them to be part of that story, and you're celebrating them, communicating and mentioning this when you talk about the story in the future as well. So I think that symbiosis is really key as well. You can't just expect this to be give to me, and I'll just take it away and that's it. It's a relationship that we both build on. Finally, mentors, the more kind of, I don't know if rungs are the right word, but the more time poor they are, the more diligent you need to be on your follow-ups and making it easier for them to help you. So one thing that I always do is if I need something from my mentors, I go into it very explicitly. And if they say, okay, Zubair, send me an introduction, send me this, they want to connect me to someone, before they even end the call, I'll send them a paragraph so that they can copy paste it and use it in an email to introduce me. Because we don't want them to work on those things. If they want to specific document or specific insight, I'm going to share it with them. And I'm proactive in my relationships. All of our kind of people who are close to me and I want to keep up to date are being sent out, regular outreaches and updates as well. So yes, my mentor is not responding to you. If that's what you're going to say, it's because you're probably not pushing hard enough. If you're seeking the mentorship, then you need to be in the proactive position as well.
I love that. So be vulnerable, make sure the relationship is symbiotic, and also just open communications, right? Make their lives easy and communicate openly. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think one thing you mentioned around age was around sometimes you have people who are roughly the same age, sometimes they're older and whatnot. One thing that I've been doing that I love is reverse mentoring. So I have a high schooler in my team who mentors me once a month and shares like what she's reading or what she's been learning recently. And that's also been a really good experience for me. So big shout out to reverse mentoring. And in terms of your journey, like going back, if you could do it all over again, what's one thing that you do differently, if anything?
This sounds contradictory to, maybe it sounds contradictory. It shouldn't be, but it sounds a little different to the kind of the conversation I've had up till now. But for a long time, I was in this naive perspective that, funding and support will be available as the support organization grows. And I think I came across a lot of false realities thinking through that journey. ZNotes is a for-profit but a for-purpose business. It's set out in that way. And I knew I wanted to be a social entrepreneur and not develop ZNotes as a nonprofit or as a charity, purely as a nonprofit or charity. We do have a nonprofit entity because it had to be sustainable. And I think it's taken, I would have spent more time right at the beginning to think about sustainable models to keep it going. We're working on that right now. And I think it's going to be a key challenge for us, but also an opportunity for us to grow and develop. But at the same time, I think as social entrepreneurs, if you're not lining up your funding or revenue generations deeply with the mission that you wish to solve, you may not be able to scale and sustain for a long period of time. So I think I've had the luck of building it in a bootstrap way for a long time and not needing is not the right word, but kind of having a very lean structure to be able to build for a long period without having a huge requirement. But now increasingly it's important to think about where does ZNotes go a decade later so that it not just reaches 1 million students, but reaches 10 million, 100 million people around the world. And then that model is very different to the model that we've built up to now. It's replicating it, but it's also about accelerating the speed of growth as well, because we need to solve this problem. Young people are not getting supported for their secondary school education. Current projections say that only 6 in 10 young people will actually end up doing secondary school by 2030. That is hugely off the targets that we have. And that's not good enough. And we need to be part of that solution. And yes, it's great to be able to share the journey and the millions that we've reached, but we have tens of millions more to reach. And how do we do that? We need to find out the models and the sustainability and the systemic changes that can make that happen. So I would have doubled down on that years ago if I and not been kind of under the false impression that the funding and support will appear naturally because you're doing a good thing. Because you can be doing a good thing, but you need to be doing something that actually sustains itself as well.
Wow. Thanks for being so open and honest about that, because I think that's probably one of the key issues that a lot of social entrepreneurs face. I myself faced a lot of issues with fundraising and also, with revenue generation as well, when we were running a social enterprise during my time in Honduras in Central America, where we were helping small-scale farmers export coffee to the U.S. And it was a struggle, man. It was a real struggle. And I think sometimes, for people like you and I, we run social enterprises, but sometimes we tend to focus a little bit too much on the social part, and we forget that at the end of the day, it's an enterprise. We have to pay people. We have to make sure that it's scalable. And so I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit more about what your current profit model is, and also how you're trying to sort of improve on that for the future for version 2 of ZNotes.
Of course. So there are a couple things under wraps right now. So I'll share what's live. But of course, at the heart of it, we have been a massive audience and community, and we're looking at brands and sponsors and entities that want to be supporting and kind of contributing and engaging with this community. And sponsorship is a key pathway that we're exploring right now. We're excited to be kicking off some partnerships, which we've done over the last few weeks, and continue to grow that as a sustainable revenue stream, not restricting access to the content, but actually providing another value add to our community and generating revenues as well. We also have, interestingly enough, a whole bunch of adopted schools. So there are certain schools where hundreds of students are all using ZNotes. We're looking at how can we serve these schools better in a kind of like a service model, and we're looking at where we can reach out to them and what sort of product we can develop. So the B2B schools is an interesting one. The third one is around how the community can support. So we have educators part of this community. We have students who may be able to contribute to the community as well. And so we're in the kind of early stages of developing what it would look like for the ZNotes community to also be, financially supporting the organization towards its mission as well. At the heart of it, the culture is key to cultivate and safeguard. The mission is key to safeguard. And there have been a whole bunch of legal and structural changes we've done to make sure that is never disturbed. And inherently, we want to make sure that education is available freely for all. But we need to figure out the right ways for it to be, sustainable as well. And so those are current challenges and current things that we're looking at. I'd love to kind of keep you maybe on another episode to share what the updates are on those as well.
Yes, please. We'd love that.
Yeah, we would love that. 6 months down the line, a year down the line, man. Excited to see your journey in all of this. Okay, well, I guess as we sort of come to an end fairly soon, one last question that I wanted to ask from my end is regarding the why. So Zubair, like, what gets you up in the morning? Like, how do you keep going with all of this? Like, you've been running this organization for such a long time now. Like, what drives you? What's your mission?
For my whole life story has always been the importance of education to seeing the social mobility realized. And it's a personal one. It's how my family's social mobility was realized. It's how mine was. And so education, access to education so that it excels, accelerates, and kind of unlocks opportunities has always been the kind of the key driver for me. It's the story I've seen, and I want to see it and replicate it for every young person in this world. So the motivation to start ZNotes and continue ZNotes has always been linked to that. Right now, I think there's a whole bunch of things that wake me up every morning. The excitement to see what this organization can do next, the potential it has, but also the responsibility I have on the young people who have dedicated their time, on the mentors who've kind of invested their time in me. All these kind of unique characteristics of building a community-first organization means that you sit with a lot of people looking up to you and also expecting stuff from you. And so the kind of the potentiality is probably the one that really makes me jump up in the morning, and the responsibility is the one that grounds me, that actually I hold a whole bunch of people's dedicated time. I hold a very, very big mission, and I've had the privilege to be at key stakeholder engagements, moments, meet the right people, share the work that we do, that I need to be continuing to do this and seeing where it can take us.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you, man. Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of, teenagers hopefully a lot of teenagers also listening to Coffee with Changemakers. So how can they support you and ZNotes? Like where can we find you, right? Where can we follow your journey and support your work? If you can maybe share a little bit on that, that'll be great.
Absolutely. So we're a web-based platform. So Google ZNotes or just go to znotes.org. We'd love to have you if you're doing any of the exams that we're offering to support. We also, as I said, a lot of what we do is youth-led. So please, would love for you to get involved through the various initiatives. So znotes.org/join shows you the different pathways, whether that's contributions, internships, ambassadorships. For those of you who may be further ahead in your journey, we also have a pathway for expert reviewers. And finally, just follow our journey and amplify the work that we do, on social medias and so forth as well. But yeah, very grateful, Yoshi, for giving us a shout out as well. And it's really important, I think, that people use and benefit from it in the best ways that they find it.
Thank you so much, man. Well, I mean, I'm kind of sad that this is coming to an end because I feel like I just want to learn more and more from this session. I really felt like I was back in my master's class in graduate school. Like this is really the level of insights that you have is just phenomenal. And it really speaks to you, your efforts, your team's efforts, all of your experiences that you've gone through to this day. So really, really commend you for that. Awesome stuff. If I were to just, maybe highlight one thing that I want to take away personally from this is what you said about leadership, how you yourself have to set the standard for the organization and how that really penetrates throughout the rest of the organization. And that's obviously something that, Robin and I need to remind ourselves on a daily basis as leaders ourselves. So thank you for reminding us about that key lesson. What about you, Robin? What were some of your takeaways?
I'm just super happy to have chatted with Zubair. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And I know it's been a couple of years since we met in person, so it's been fantastic to catch up. And as Yoshi said, I think there were so many insights that you shared, from everything from balance and well-being to community management to financial sustainability. I think there were so many nuggets of knowledge and joy in there. So thank you so much for sharing. One thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go running tomorrow morning after hearing about your routine. So thank you again for all the inspiration. And to all of our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to please check out Zubair's work and his fantastic organization. And yeah, thank you so much, Zubair, for joining.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for creating a beautiful space for me to share my journey. And it is wonderful to catch up, friends that you meet all across the world and then reconnect years later, but it feels like it's only been yesterday.
Awesome. So remember, listeners, the power to create change is in your hands. So keep leading the way, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Let's keep brewing change, one cup of coffee at a time. Thank you, Zubair.